Okay, so our group is arguing that the origins of the American Revolution was that the American elite were seeking status, and our thesis is the British taxed the Americans without giving them any representation in Parliament. The American elite went from being proud of being English to feeling inferior to the British. This enraged the Americans to the point of revolution. Now, initially, the Americans loved being British. They thought they were as part of the British Empire. They were very proud of being British. They did everything that the British did, and to call them not British would be a big insult. And just a quote from an American colonialist who saw the throne, he says, "I gaze for some time at the throne with emotions that I cannot describe. I ask my guide if it is common for strangers to sit on it. Accordingly, I advance towards the throne. I sit down on it. I am seized with a kind of awe. I feel as if I am on top of a mountain." And that just describes how they love the British, they love the British aristocracy, and they feel a great attraction to them. And then another quote from that is, "New Yorkers read British books and British newspapers, and in Boston they drink their tea in Wedgwood cups imported from England," which says that not only do they want to be British, they want British things, and they're very proud of their heritage as British people.
Yeah, however, the British government, they imposed Stamp Act to the Americans, which shows that British government trivialized and belittled the wealthy upper class of America because they don't have any say in it. And it is an outrage to the colonial elite, which confirmed their worst suspicions that they are not respected in England, not even being worth consulted about this change of policy. The Stamp Act, they taxed dice and cards, which made the sailors angry because they are the rowdiest folks. And they also taxed legal documents, which made the lawyers, the most articulate and argumentative people in America, are angry as well. And there's a quote from the book. It says, "The Stamp Act managed to offend virtually every free colonist, rich, poor, farmers, artisans, and merchants. It was especially resented by the members of the public sphere who wrote, published, and read books and newspapers and followed political affairs." So the problem is not about the amount of the taxation. The question is whether the British had the right to do this at all. And there's another quote from the book. By imposing the stamp tax without colonial consent, Parliament directly challenged the authority of local elites who, through the assemblies they controlled, had established their power over the rising and spending of money. So the opposition of the Stamp Act created the first major split between the colonists and Great Britain over the meaning of freedom. Even though after the Stamp Act was repealed, the British government established the Declaratory Act, which claims that there's the asserting right of the British government to make laws for the American colonies in all cases, which shows that the British government intends to control the Americans. Therefore, the leaders like Benjamin Franklin they will talk about later, were ready to defend this authority in the name of liberty.
So, on January 29th, 1774, Benjamin Franklin was called before the Privy Council, and he was humiliated there in public, but he remained silent then because he knew that silence had much power, and he eventually took revenge later on. So Benjamin Franklin was already successful in terms of economics because he was already he was a good inventor, author, and a printer. So he was already successful, but he wanted to bring the people in America together to fight off the British people. And one of the big things that were going on at that time was the Stamp Act, which put tax on the stamps. And the British also taxed many different other things than the Stamp Act. And it really enraged much people from America. So Benjamin Franklin tried to unite those people that were outraged for the same reasons. And I have a quote here. I have two quotes that are related. They're famous quotes from Benjamin Franklin. And they who can give up essential liberty to obtain a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety. The other one is, justice will not be served until those who are unaffected are as outraged as those who are. And you can see that he's trying to unite the people together that are outraged and not outraged. Because he knew that when people are united, they have the most power, and they need the most power that they can have to beat the British government.
So the basic idea of why the British were angry was not that they were just taxed, because they didn't have a problem with taxes. They would have been happy to tax themselves and happy to even give that money to England. The issue was the fact that the English taxed them without their say. They had no representation in Parliament. They had no idea that this was going to happen. All of a sudden, the English just kind of dropped it on them. They even taxed pens and paper, which angered the lawyers, who were the smartest and most literate people. So they really should have been able to figure out that they were going to have it coming to them after doing that. In England, the only people who were taxed without say in Parliament were servants, slaves, women, and children. So all the wealthy people over here in America, like the lawyers, were all being sort of put down to the level of servants, slaves, women, and children in England, which, as you can imagine, was pretty offensive to them. My quote here from the movie is, "The Stamp Act implied that they were going to be governed, taxed by Parliament, a long way away in which they had no representatives. The only people who were taxed without their consent in Britain were servants, people who didn't have any property, women, and children. And so the Stamp Act seemed to Americans to reduce them to the same status as servants and women and all those dependent people who were civilly emasculated."
So yeah, full cast. Later, Franklin was humiliated in London at the court in May 1775. He was an important leader of the American Revolution. He returned to Philadelphia after the Revolutionary War had begun. He was selected as a delegate to the Second Continental Congress, America's governing body at the time. In 1776, he was a part of the 5-member committee that helped draft the Declaration of Independence, in which the 13 American colonies declared their freedom from British rule. In that same year, Congress sent Franklin to France to enlist that nation's help with the Revolutionary War. February 1778, French signed a military alliance with America and went on to provide soldier supplies and money that provide critical to America's victory in the war. one of the like famous propaganda was from Franklin was join or die. It is a woodcut showing a snake cut into eight, with each segment labeled with the initials of one of the 13 American colonies or regions. And New England was represented as one segment rather than the 4 colonies it was at the time. The cartoon appeared along Franklin's editorial about the disunited state of the colonies. This cartoon was used in the French and Indian War to symbolize that colonies needed to join together with Great Britain to defeat the French and Indians. It became a symbol of colonial freedom during the American Revolutionary War. So like after that he helped get rid of the Stamp Act. Later on, he traveled to London as a representative of Pennsylvania, to which he was elected in 1751. Over several years, he worked to settle a tax dispute and other issues involving descendants of William Penn. 1766, he was testified in the British Parliament against the Stamp Act of 1765, which required that all legal documents, newspapers, books, playing cards, and other printed materials in American colonies carry a stamp tag. Although the Stamp Act was repealed in 1766, additional regulatory measures followed, leading to ever-increasing anti-British sentiment and eventual armed uprising by the American colonists. So like after he was humiliated by Alexander Wedderburn at the court, he took revenge by defeat the British in the war, American Revolution. One of my quote is fear not death, for the sooner we die, the longer we shall be immortal. Shows that he encouraged other colonies to fight for themselves against the British, and encouraged them to fight during the American Revolution.